Can only one prize redefine the narrative of a whole season and make the most laureate pilot of the 21st century believe in itself? What happened in Monza with Lewis Hamilton not only surprised the paddock, but left Ferrari without words. After a start of the season loaded with frustrations, criticism and doubts about his decision to change teams, Lewis Hamilton arrived in Monza not as a contender to the title, but as a figure wrapped in uncertainty. However, in that Italian weekend something changed. The transformation was not immediate or explosive, but subtle, almost imperceptible at the beginning. But those who know the essence of a champion pilot understood that they were witnessing the rebirth of a legendary competitor. Monza is not only the fastest circuit of the calendar, it is also a scenario loaded with history for Ferrari. And it was there, where the whole environment becomes emotionally dense and symbolically significant, that Hamilton finally found his place within the Scuderia myth. From days before the race, a different environment was already breathing. The city of Milan received Hamilton with an overflowing energy. His public appearance in the Piazza del Duomo was almost cinematographic. Thousands of tifosi shouting his name, shaking red flags with the rampant Cavallino, merging past and present in a single act of devotion. And the most surprising thing was that this devotion was not directed to a Leclerc or a Sainz, but to Hamilton, a British who had been seen as Ferrari's great antagonist. The scene was so surreal for him, that in a later interview he confessed that he still had to pinch to believe he was dressed in red. What happened that weekend cannot be understood without the emotional component, but neither without the technician. Ferrari arrived in Monza with a very specific update package, designed with a clear strategy. Minimize the chronic weaknesses of the SF-25 in slow curves and exploit its speed in a straight line. It was a bold and risky decision. The team chose to recover pieces from the SF-24 of the previous year, specifically a rear spoiler and low-load beam wing that had been key in the victory of Leclerc in 2024. In addition, they adjusted the flaps of the front wing and made slight modifications in the car floor. These changes were not revolutionaries but surgical. They were designed to make SF-25 a missile in Monza's lines. Hamilton, meanwhile, also did its share. Throughout the previous week, he worked side by the engineers, studying telemetrias, comparing their braking style and curve entrance with that of Leclerc, and adapting its piloting to the specific demands of this track. It was not the Hamilton of the dominant era of Mercedes, which simply came out and destroyed Kronos. He was a more mature, more reflective pilot, who understood that the key to perform was to rebuild the connection with his car from the base. That approach allowed him to find a balance that until then had been elusive. The classification was a sample of that progress. Hamilton was fifth, his best result in months, although a penalty of 5 positions for an infraction under yellow flag in Zandvoort relegated it to the 10th place of the grid. Even so, something had changed. It was no longer only the exit position but about body language, how he spoke with the press, the security with which he walked through the paddock. It was the language of someone who had recovered faith in itself. The race was the culmination of that metamorphosis. From the start, Hamilton showed a fierce determination, but without despair. Each advance was a perfect combination of millimeter calculation and controlled aggressiveness. He did not force where he should not, but took advantage of every minimal opportunity to move forward. His career reading was impeccable, adapting to the strategic decisions of the equipment and maximizing the rhythm of the car in the middle stretch of race, where the SF-25 showed its best version thanks to the low aerodynamic load and the lower wear of tires. One of the most symbolic moments arrived on Tour 28, when Hamilton executed a clean and forceful surpass on one of the McLaren, precisely the team that had eclipsed him throughout the season. It was a perfect narrative turn, the veteran that everyone was terminating with elegance and mastery, to the car that represented the new era. But beyond positions and statistics, what happened in Monza was a catharsis. Hamilton did not win the race but won something more important, its legitimacy as a Ferrari pilot. The engineers hugged him at the end of the day, the mechanics chanted their name in the box, and the tifosi, those who months ago doubted their loyalty to the Shield, now venerated him as one of his own. That weekend in Monza was not just a good performance. It was an act of affirmation. A sample that Hamilton had not reached Ferrari to retire in peace, but to write one of the most dramatic, exciting and possibly glorious chapters of his career. And if something was clear in the Nazionale Autodrome, it is that the old champion still has fire in his veins. And that fire, for the first time throughout the season, began to burn at a foreign house, but with the soul already in Maranello. Lewis Hamilton's performance in Monza was undeniably powerful. But a more complex question begins to emerge between analysts, fans and within the same paddock. Are we facing a real restart of his stage in Ferrari, Or was it simply a fleeting illusion, amplified by the stage and emotion? To respond to that unknown, you have to consider multiple layers. First, from the technical. The SF-25 remains a car with deep structural limitations. Despite the outstanding performance in Monza, that car has not ceased to be unpredictable. Ferrari designed it with an aerodynamic base that requires rolling at an extremely low height to generate optimal load. But that same design has been the cause of multiple sanctions and obligatory adjustments. If the car goes down too much, the iron suffers illegal wear. If you raise it to avoid it, the car loses curve efficiency. That dichotomy has been the SF-25 Achilles heel throughout the season. Therefore, Hamilton's brilliance in Monza occurred within a very specific context. A circuit of low aerodynamic load, few technical curves, and long straight. That is, a layout that partially masks the fundamental defects of the car. From this perspective, Monza's performance could be a tactical mirage. In more complex paths such as Suzuka, Singapore, or Barcelona, where a more stable and versatile platform is required, the SF-25 will once again be at a disadvantage against Red Bull, McLaren, and even Mercedes. And that means that Hamilton, if he wants to stay competitive, will have to resort to his ability to adapt again, even when the car does not accompany him. Now there is another equally important component, if not more, the emotional one. Hamilton's narrative in Ferrari can no longer be explained only for times back. What we saw in Monza went to a pilot who, after months of internal doubts, reunited something essential: conviction. The conviction that he did not make a mistake by leaving Mercedes, that it can still make a difference, that it still has emotional fuel for a last great adventure in Formula One. The psychological value of what happened in Monza cannot be underestimated. Throughout his career, Hamilton has been a pilot who performs to the fullest when he feels supported and understood. And for the first time in 2025, Ferrari's environment seemed to align with his leadership. The cameras not only showed him by celebrating with their team, but receiving authentic gestures of respect for engineers and mechanics. People who, at the beginning of the year, looked at him as an external star, an outsider. Now they hugged him as one more, as an integral part of the project. That internal chemistry can be the true spark that changes the course of this story. We must also talk about the broader context, the pressure of the pilot market, the technical situation of Red Bull, and the growing threat of McLaren. If Ferrari wants to have any realistic hope of fighting for titles in 2026, he must begin his reconfiguration now in 2025. And that transformation process cannot be done without a leader. In that sense, Monza was the clearest statement so far that Hamilton could be that leader. Not for the points, but for the message, for resilience. Because of the way, even from the 10th place of the grill, he was able to generate a winning narrative for the team. But all this faces a danger: to believe that inaction is sufficient. Ferrari is a historically trapped team between excessive euphoria after a good result and self-destruction after a technical error or a failed strategy. And Hamilton knows. He has lived it since his arrival. What he did in Monza must consolidate consistency, not with nostalgia. The question that opens then is fundamental. Will Ferrari use this result as a springboard to redefine its work structure, its technical approach, and its internal culture? Or will they fall again into the historical error of thinking that a good career erases months of structural deficiency? The same applies to Hamilton. Can you maintain that level of performance in less favorable circuits? Do you still have hunger to fight a generation that sees it as a reference of the past? Will it be able to accept that this project will take more than one season and that the podiums will be sporadic in the short term? Monza 2025 was not a victory in the traditional sense. There was no trophy for Hamilton. The British anthem did not sound on the podium, nor were there fireworks in the sky. But there was something more powerful: the unanimous roar of thousands of Italian tifosi recognizing that they had witnessed the return of a pilot who refuses to be a legend of the past. Lewis Hamilton did not win the race, but he did win the narrative. And in a sport like Formula One, where each story weighs as much as the results, that can be more than any trophy. Now the ball is on the side of Ferrari. Are they going to take this spark as the beginning of a serious strategic reconstruction, with Hamilton as axis, or will they return to the usual patterns? Will they be able to strengthen the weak areas of the SF-25, invest in medium-term technical solutions, and design a 2026 where the name of Ferrari is again associated with the word championship? There are no easy answers, but what happened in Monza gave them time. Time to think, to plan, and to make decisions with courage. And you who are watching this video, stop a second and think, are we watching the rebirth of an era? Or just a brilliant night in the middle of a continuous storm? Can a single circuit rewrite the fate of a season? And can a pilot who has already won everything continue surprising the world? Let him know in the comments. Do you think Lewis Hamilton can lead Ferrari again to the world title? Or was Monza simply a moment of isolated glory in a story that is still full of obstacles?